I will introduce each speaker after the previous speaker finishes, and that will give you time as well to type in and communicate with us. Thank you very much. Margaret, the floor is yours.
Hello. Thank you very much, Teddy. Good afternoon, everyone in East Africa, and good morning to those who are listening from the United States. I'd like to welcome everybody to this very important webinar, whose theme is doing business with the United States. I would like to also welcome the panelists who have come from East Africa. We have speakers from East Africa, and we also have a couple of speakers from the United States who share their insights. So welcome everybody, and thank you for making time. The objective of the webinar is fourfold. First of all, as the project, that is the USAID Southern Africa Trade and Investment Hub, East Africa activity. We have various things that we're doing. We'd like to also share with you what we're planning to do and what we're currently doing. Secondly, we'd like to provide information on developments in the footwear industry, and particularly the footwear market in the United States, in view of the issues that have arisen this year because of COVID, and also the changes in consumer demand and methods of consumer purchases. These are very important for you as exporters to understand, particularly if you want to sell to that market. Thirdly, we also want to learn from one another, and there are various experiences which will be shared. The fact that we have only 3 speakers from the factory side does not mean those are the only insights that will be heard. So we encourage the audience, please share your experiences, give your comments, and even when you're giving your questions, even though you need to be brief, you can also give some commentary on the technical content. And last but not least, we hope you'll be able to network and identify potential partners, customers, or suppliers you can do business with in the future. I just want to tell you, next slide, yeah, thank you, very briefly about the USAID Trade and Investment Hub. This is the Southern Africa Trade and Investment Hub. They're based in Pretoria. It's a 5-year trade and investment program for Southern Africa. It's intended to increase global competitiveness, promote interregional trade, and improve food security in Southern Africa. It partners across that region to increase sustainable economic growth, increase global export competitiveness, and grow trade in targeted Southern African countries. It also works to increase exports to the US under AGOA, which is part of the discussion today, boosting capital and technology flows, and providing targeted trade facilitation support to the enterprises. However, as you all know, we are in East Africa discussing with the US, how does this fit in? So essentially, we are a project activity of the USAID, that's United States International Agency for International Development, USAID. And under that, the USAID mission in East Africa has partnered with the USAID mission in Southern Africa, in Pretoria specifically, to do this buy-in activity where we are able to support East Africans under a Southern Africa project. So that's why we are under TradeHub, but doing East Africa. And our activity is intended to promote economic activity between the United States and 5 Eastern African countries. That's Ethiopia, Kenya, Rwanda, Tanzania, and Uganda. Over the 18 months of the project, we will be expected to boost two-way trade and investment between the US and East Africa, specifically under the US government's Prosper Africa initiative, with a major focus being on the following. One is expanding exports to the US under AGOA. You all know AGOA has been in existence for 20 years. It is due to expire in 2025, but before then, there are still tremendous opportunities to optimize utilization of that specific preference program. Secondly, we'll be supporting the flow of technology, of capital, and of investment from the US to East Africa. And how we'll be working with this is particularly those of you who are exporters. If you have technology needs, capital needs, investment needs, we'll be assisting you to identify sources of those specific inputs. And last but not least, trade is hampered by barriers to trade, and therefore we will be addressing, facilitating how these barriers to trade can be overcome, particularly under the East African community, of which 4 of the countries that I mentioned are members. In terms of specific activities, we have 5 major areas of work. We have, first of all, US end market studies. where we'll be collecting information for targeted products, such as the one we've recently completed for footwear. And this will be valuable to the exporters because it will help them to understand how the market looks in the US and what are the key competitiveness challenges and how they can take advantage of the opportunities presented. Secondly, we'll be doing capacity building and coaching of the enterprises engaging with the US market. Thirdly, we'll be linking the enterprises to the US markets, to US capital, and to US technology. Then we'll also be looking at the trade associations between the two regions, US and East Africa, and linking those private sector bodies. And we're happy to say that AFA is one of the speakers today, and they're a significant partner to many of the trade associations in East Africa in terms of collaboration. Finally, we'll also be supporting regional trade policy analysis and review. Which sectors are we working in? There are 5 there, you can see them. And of course, the subject of today is footwear. In terms of the performance of the sector over the last 5 financial years, now if you look at the financial fiscal year of the US, it starts in October 1st and ends on 30th of September. So the statistics you can see in front of you are in terms of exports under AGOA of footwear to the United States for the last 5 financial years, ending financial year 2020, which closed on 30th of September this year. And as you can see, the major exporter is Ethiopia, and Ethiopia probably constitutes about 95% of total exports, but they also exports from each of the countries. Small, some of them, but at least there have been some exports in the last number of years. If you look at the overall trend, the figure at the bottom shows the total AGOA exports from the 5 countries. You see it reached a peak of 33.8 million in 2018 financial year, but last year it dropped to 27, and this year, F year 2020, which ended on 30th of September, it dropped by almost half to 13.9. And I think we'll be hearing from AFA why some of those reasons for these drops in production because of the changing consumer trends as well as COVID. So these are just figures for you to digest, and we'll be talking about how we can get that graph to go back up where it was. So lastly, I'd like to welcome, yes, just look at the graph there. Thank you. And lastly, I'd like to welcome each of you to contact us if you wish to engage with the USAID TradeHub. The details are there. We have myself, we have Naima Ngene, many of you have heard from her because she's the one who's been sending out the invites. And lastly, we have Leanne, who is our communications specialist. So with no further ado, I'd like to welcome all of you to the webinar. Please take part, ask questions, give your views, and I hope you have a great afternoon. Thank you very much, and over back to Teddy.
Thank you, Margaret, for a brief project overview. Our next speaker is Mr. Jordan Saliman. Jordan is happy to introduce Mr. Jordan Saliman as a personal mentor, friend who has worked with USAID TradeHub as a footwear consultant since 2010. And Mr. Saliman has actually has a proven record of creating market linkages between EU buyers and East African manufacturers. As we fondly called him, Jordi, please take it and give us the scene setting about promoting footwear exports to the US from Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Teddy. Welcome all. Good morning to distinguished guests and my business friends who we've grown and loved through the last 10 years. The background for the US is like a moving target right now. Every day it's changing. COVID is running our business. He or she is the boss. And so the numbers and the response to it are changing daily. So we're really looking at a really opening up a business Q2 of 2021. COVID really had an impact on the retail world, and it's no secret. The foot traffic's off, the market demand for footwear is off, a lot of financial things, companies going into business, cities and states closing down. We're in Colorado, where I live. We have a second, or be really our third round of closing starts tomorrow. Limited access to restaurants are pretty well shut down, other than takeout. People are not can eat outside, but mostly for takeout. So, and it's a moving target. Every day changes because of the casualty rate or the cases. So we're still in a motion of trying to get a handle on this. We're talking about in the U.S. that the next 2 to 3 weeks will be very dramatic. But what are we going to do? You know, I think that we have to plan for the future. We have to look to March and April. We learned that global supplies were short, factories were shut down, people were laid off. We have had shipping delays, health delays, getting supplies and everything over the last, since March, when we it really hit the US market, has been really difficult on everybody. Companies have fought to stay alive. The government was giving funding, and now it's not giving funding. And hopefully with the new administration coming in, we'll have a more progressive attitude. But we have to look to the future. You know, B2B is what we've lived with, business to business. Now we're living with webinar to webinar. We have to look at wellness. We have to look at togetherness. We have to look to our workers to help lead us through this murk and mud that we're living in right now. So the brands that we're looking at, the US brands, over 20 brands are considering alternative sourcing in the United States and have been there with our great factories. And we're looking to build more. That's what the seminar is all about. Exports to the United States in East Africa, like I said, has comprised over 20. The industry itself sells the industry access to ready supplies of local and imported tan leathers, local laces, and assortments of imported components, mainly from Asia. But we're getting stronger as we were coming into this, and now we have to dig ourselves out. A lot of the factories are vertically integrated. They make their own outsoles. They have their own tanneries. Some of them are making components. And some of the factories are making components for other factories. So I think as we move through this process, that it's going to be communication, each other of us holding hands with the other factories to build on our strengths and eliminate some of our weaknesses. As Margaret mentioned, East Africa exports have dropped dramatically over the last 5 years. The big hit started in Q3 of this year. Q4 was not good at all. And we're really looking at February and March to start to move through this process. The prospects for East Africa, with more US companies looking to diversify production, East Africa offers substantial benefits from AGOA. Everything from AGOA and leather products and footwear exported to the United States is duty-free. And I know that Kenya is working on that program right now. However, we have some logistics and compliance costs that make East Africa a little more expensive. Only Ethiopia offers labor costs at par with Asian nations that dominate the footwear production. East African countries need to ensure, though, as the market's shifting, and we can see that the market's shifting as far as product goes to more athletic and leisure type footwear, we have to be consistent with the US demand. Strong trends away from leather, viewed as premium product, and a market niche largely dominated by Italy. Next slide, please. East Africa, as I said, is duty-free. AGOA is zero duty. A little correction right below that, 28 days to the US is by boat through Djibouti. to the United States, and we also have a great relationship with Ethiopian Air for transmitting and shipping larger orders. The growth trends right now is there's a segment change in footwear where a lot of the brands are moving to athletic and leisure segments. There's mass customization, experiments with different types of leathers and constructions, and working with eco-friendly products. The market segment, athletic footwear for all purposes, boots, sandals, clogs with leather uppers for men's, women, and children. Sneakers are becoming such a big part of the production and in the consumer market right now because of so much time being spent at home. Not a lot of people are going out, and the website business has been huge. But the athletic leisure types of shoes, sporty looks, where fashion outwears function. A lot of models have textiles and other kinds of materials with rubber or plastic on them, boots, flip-flops, and clogs. These slides are come from a Nordstrom's website. This is what we normally would be using for direction for footwear. And that's what our Ethiopian and Kenya factories have used in the past. But there is this next change, and it's moving into, and this is Nordstrom's website again, more sport casual types of shoes. We've been at home, hunkered down in the US in our house for 8 months. But we're buying these types of footwear because it's casual, it's leisure, and you don't have to dress up or dress down. You can see the performance by market segment, where sneakers are moving up at a very dramatic rate. Athletic footwear is moving at a dramatic rate. Leather footwear is downtrending, and footwear with textiles and other types of materials are up a little bit. But the big pushes is casual and leisure type of footwear, which all the factories need to be working towards. This is some directional technology. These shoes, this is Brooks, and you can see mesh in the uppers, stretch in the uppers, and you're going to see this type. It has functionality and a fashion look to it as well. Here you have custom 3D insoles that give comfort. Comfort is so important, and you look to the slide to the right, which is Nike, part of their 5,000 years in the making, self-lacing shoes. Easy on, easy off, and have a fashion flavor. Next slide, please. Technology is so important. Here you see Loa boots, and you have an Adidas. Just the technology, the comfort, the flexibility, easy on, easy off is where the consumer is really going to be driven. We talked about COVID. That's the boss right now. We have to live with this over the next probably 4 to 6 months. But our job in the future is to plan now. Put our people to work. They have passion. They have love. As we wait for the vaccines to come through, love them, embrace them, and let's keep them working and develop an export business to the U.S., which is a great consumer market. Thank you so very much. Be well, be safe, and take care of yourself.
Thank you, Jordi. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'll just straight go to our next speaker, Mr. Nate Herman from the American Apparel and Footwear Association. I would like to introduce Mr. Nate, who is AFS Government Relations Department, managing the association lobbying policy and regulatory affair activities. Mr. Nate leads AFS Corporate Social Responsibility Program, formulating and implementing CSR policy and representing AFA and the industry on CSR issues before governments, NGOs, and other key stakeholders. Mr. Nate, welcome. Thank you very much for your time. You have the floor. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Teddy, and good morning and good afternoon, everyone. And thanks also to the TradeHub for having me here today. If you go, yes, thank you. So just a quick about AFA. We are the National Association for the Apparel and Footwear Industry in the United States. We represent about 1,000 name brands, and we focus on three main areas: trade, and that's why I'm here today; supply chain and manufacturing, which involves everything regarding making the product and then getting the product from the factory to the store. So that would be transportation, logistics, social responsibility, sustainability, product safety, labeling, and other issues, and then brand protection, which deals with counterfeiting. And so we're very active in all three of those pillars. Next slide. So Jordy was talking about the situation in the United States with COVID. So I just figured I'd share the latest numbers. And these numbers are as of this past Monday. The situation has actually gotten worse since Monday. So these trend lines that you're seeing on these graphs are continuing to go up. So that's where we are. So you have hospitalizations continuing to go up. And then next slide, with the average daily deaths, we've now hit in the United States over 250,000 deaths as of yesterday. I could slow down a little bit on the slides, I appreciate it. So what has COVID done? So Jordy described some of it, but I'll add a little bit more color here. So the COVID has done a couple of things. First of all, we've had on the supply chain side, we've had supply chain shocks. As COVID has hit certain parts of the world, some of the countries that supply our footwear have been shut down. And so we've had to deal with these supply chain shocks, or the countries that supply the parts that go to other countries to be made into shoes have also shut down. So we've had problems on the supply chain side, and now that the world is going through a second wave of COVID, we're starting to see some of those shocks again. Demand shocks, and I'll show you the numbers in a moment, and Jordy described some of this. What we saw with COVID is we've seen closed stores, a lot of uncertainty on when stores can reopen, a lot of uncertainty on when those stores will close again. We've seen a huge drop in demand, canceled orders, and then, as Jordy described, a dramatic change in what customers want. We've gone from fashion shoes, dress shoes, nice sandals, to now heavily comfort shoes. Crocs is one of the companies who's done surprisingly well throughout this pandemic, which gives you sort of an idea of where people have gone with footwear. As Jordy described, we've been pushing hard for stimulus and COVID relief. We got one, but we haven't gotten one support since April, and the industry is in desperate need of it. The holiday season, which is happening right now in the United States, is the most critical time for the industry. If stores start closing again, which in some states are starting to put new restrictions on retail right in the middle of holiday season, that could devastate a number of companies. And so we've seen already a record number of bankruptcies and store closings this year. We could see that accelerate next year if we have to shut down again during the middle of holiday season, which again is about 60% of our business annually, is the business that comes in between November and the end of December. So the other two things I wanted to mention is that we've had a strong pivot to personal protective equipment. And some of you might have experienced this, where you have your customers asking if you could produce face masks or surgical gowns or related personal protective equipment. And so a lot of our members have pivoted to that. We've tried to provide them information on what the standards are, the labeling requirements, and other requirements to bring those face masks into the United States. And so that's been one pivot that the industry has made. Obviously, the other, there's been three main pivots. The other is changing the types of shoes they're providing to customers. And then the last pivot, and Jordy briefly mentioned this, is the pivot to e-commerce and omnichannel. And I'll show you in the numbers in a moment, but e-commerce has exploded under the pandemic. As physical stores are not open or have very restrictive operating, people have moved to e-commerce in droves. And what has happened with a lot of the physical stores is actually they become pickup points. And so people order online and then go to the store and pick up the product curbside. And so the stores have either become distribution points or mini distribution centers because they all have their own inventory. And so that's a way to provide to build out your e-commerce. So now all of a sudden you have 100, 200, 300 distribution centers that can all serve your e-commerce business. And so that's been a major change as well. And for many companies, that's the only way that they've survived the current pandemic till now. Next slide. So where are we right now? U.S. footwear imports are down by over 1/4 from the same period in 2019. And this is the most recent data available, which is through September. So we're talking about significantly down from where we were last year. Next slide. Why are we down? Because revenue has dropped off a cliff. So these are the comparable store sales for clothing and shoe stores and department stores in the United States. And you can see what happened starting in March, dramatically accelerated in April, but it's still even in existence last month, as recently as October. Every single month, our retail sales are down compared with the same month in 2019. And that trend is continuing, and you can see even in October, it started accelerating again. It was getting bigger or worse again versus the downward trend that had been happening since June. And so that's the situation here. Nobody's buying things, and so we see the numbers way down. Now, going to the next slide, you'll see that e-commerce, on the other hand, has exploded. Every single month, we've seen significant double-digit increases in what we call non-store retail sales. Now, the difference is, that looks great, and so that, in many ways, looks like it should make up for the decline in sales at retail stores, but e-commerce is still a small percentage of overall sales. It was about 6 to 8% before the pandemic. Now it's up to about 20%, but that means 80% is still dependent on those physical stores, those brick and mortar stores. And so that's the situation that we're in right now. So the e-commerce explosion is great, but it does not make up for all the losses that we've experienced at normal brick and mortar retail stores. Next slide. So what are we facing going forward here? We face a lot of trade issues that impact the industry, but also can impact East Africa as a supplier. The China trade war continues. We've already paid over $550 billion in punitive tariffs on U.S. imports from China. This is not just footwear, but all imports that face the punitive tariffs since the trade war started in 2017. And there's no sign that that's going to end. Even with a President-elect Biden, it's going to probably take a President-elect Biden a decent amount of time to try and reverse those tariffs. And President-elect Biden will be focusing on other issues. There's a big issue with a group called the Uyghurs in a region of China called Xinjiang. This has led to talk about banning imports that contain any materials from Xinjiang. This is big on the apparel side, but also an important issue on the footwear side, as there are certain rubber and other materials that come from Xinjiang. And they also produce footwear themselves. And so there could be a U.S. import ban on that product. And so that's a major concern that we're watching. And so that impacts our sourcing from China. Then we have a new investigation that our current president, President Trump, has launched on Vietnam. Vietnam is the number 2 supplier of footwear to the U.S. market, and a fast-growing supplier of footwear to the U.S. market. Supplies about 1/5 of of all footwear sold in the United States, almost 1/4 at this point. So these investigations have been launched by the Trump administration, and there's concern that President Trump, before he leaves office, will impose punitive tariffs on Vietnam. Now, President Biden will probably reverse those tariffs, but it'll create a lot of uncertainty, and it will take time to reverse them. And so that'll create a big mess. I also want to mention the U.S. Generalized System of Preferences program, or GSP program. Right now, footwear is not a beneficiary of this, but there's a lot of attempts to add footwear to the GSP program. The reason I'm mentioning this is that this is a program that allows duty-free access from developing countries. The program currently expires at the end of this year, and it's unclear if Congress will renew the program before it expires. So that's a big deal because, again, a major competitor to East Africa. A lot of footwear is coming from these countries, and so there'd be a big beneficiary if footwear is eventually added to the program. So that's something to watch. Further, the GSP program has provisions and requirements for countries to benefit from the program. There's some talk about reviewing a number of countries. Major footwear suppliers, such as Cambodia and Burma or Myanmar, that could be facing review in a Biden administration under President-elect Biden. And so those are things to be looking at because those are your competitors in this space. And then I have to mention AGOA. Margaret mentioned at the beginning about AGOA expiring in 2025. There is a lot of concern that there's not going to be an appetite to renew AGOA when it expires. And so we've already started a campaign here at the American Apparel and Footwear Association to try and push for a renewal early on AGOA and modify it so that there is a driver to join. There's negotiations towards a free trade agreement with Kenya that we take a regional approach to both AGOA and free trade agreements so that even once there is a U.S.-Kenya trade agreement, that it allows Kenya to still use regional inputs. It encourages other countries in East Africa to join the trade agreement to keep this regional approach that all of you have been working so hard on, and to keep AGOA going beyond 2025. And so that work is ongoing. President Trump, if he was reelected, that would have been a big issue because President Trump was not a fan of AGOA. He was a fan of bilateral trade agreements. And so there was a lot of concern there. President Biden hopefully will be much more open to an early renewal of AGOA. And then obviously, as we all talked about, we have continued uncertainty in the industry. And so we're watching that very closely. Next slide. So what does that mean for sourcing? So these are the sort of the stark numbers that you're facing. These are your competitors. So today, even with everything that's happened with China in the last few years, China still supplies 61% of all footwear sold in the United States. Now, this is down from a much higher number before the trade war started, but still, you're talking about 3/5 of all shoes sold in the United States are still imported from China. And so it's a downward trend, but it's still a major supplier. Now, this also presents a lot of opportunity. If that number continues to fall, people are going to be looking to replace that, and that's where East Africa can come in and be that supplier. Next slide. So what are the other countries involved? As I mentioned, Vietnam is about supplies 1/4 of all footwear sold in the United States today. So, and then you can see your major competitors. Now, the one thing to note here is that overall footwear imports are down significantly for the first 9 months of this year. Out of all these suppliers, only 4 are seeing increases in their exports to the United States. Cambodia, which is the biggest one, it has had a double-digit increase this year, despite everything going on. And so that is a country that you guys need to watch. Now, Cambodia has labor and human rights issues, can run into problems in a Biden administration. And so that's something to watch as well. But the thing to note here is that, yes, they're the number 4 supplier. They've had a dramatic increase, but they supply only 3% of total imports, even though they're the number 4 supplier. So there's a lot of space here for other countries to come in. And then when you look at the other countries that are experiencing increases, you have Burma. Yeah, huge increase this year, but they account for only 0.4% of total U.S. imports. Same thing with Bangladesh and Germany, very, very small amounts. But these are the competitors that you're going to be dealing with. Next slide. So I just wanted to go through finish off the top 20, and you can see when you get down to the 20th supplier, which is Ethiopia, you're seeing the numbers dramatically decrease. You're talking about 0.1% of total U.S. footwear imports for Ethiopia. When you get to Kenya and Uganda, you're talking about 0.003%, 0.001%. You're talking about very, very small suppliers in the scope of things. But that also presents a lot of opportunity for your industry to enter the U.S. market. Again, even every single percentage point that China decreases, you're talking about millions of shoes that account for that percentage point. And so that creates new opportunities for all of you. So I'll stop there and turn it back over to Teddy.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nate, for a very informative presentation. Our next speaker will be Dr. Frank, who is President and CEO of New Wing Shoes Ethiopia. Dr. Frank is also chairman of the Federation of Hong Kong Footwear and managing director of New Wing Addis. New Wing is a Hong Kong-based company and one of the biggest exporters of footwear out of Ethiopia to the US. Dr. Frank, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Teddy. I'm Frank. My company name is New Wing Addis Footwear Factory. We are ladies footwear manufacturer, and our shoes factory in Ethiopia was at 2011, and we start to export at 2012. 95% of our product is shipping to USA. Today, I would like to use a factory perspective to run this presentation. And my topic is the function of footwear design and footwear production technology for doing business with the US market. As you see this slide, Ethiopia is a landlocked country. There is a government department, Central Statistical Agency. Every year, they are conducting a survey for all the industry. And one of the questions they ask is, what is the major problem facing by the manufacturing company in Ethiopia? And I go through the 5 years data from 2013 to 2018. And I found the first problem is the shortage of raw material supply, which is arising from the logistic problem. The second problem is shortage of the spare parts, which is also related to logistic and also related to the technical problem and the lack of technician around. The third one is getting the market and no more custom, which is talking about lack of promotion. Next page. Next slide, please. Yes. In fact, this problem is very common in Ethiopia, and my company is facing it, and we are trying very hard to deal with them in the last 9 years. And what we do for removing the supply chain uncertainty and technology transfer problem Ethiopia has the labor cost advantage, so it is the best choice for us to put as much as manufacturing facility in Ethiopia. As a more international manufacturing company, we are having a very limited resources. So when we receive the order, we will read it very carefully and communicate with our customer for the production details. Also, Hong Kong will send the order information to China for running the production sample and raw material supply for procurement, planning for equipment technology transfer. Next page, please. Footwear design and production technology is a very important role in the whole operation. Footwear design, what is the raw material to be used, what kind of machinery equipment should be applied. Generally speaking, footwear design can be divided into 7 major elements, which is last, upper, insole, bottom, heel, footbed, and accessory. In order to reduce the troublesome from the supply chain uncertainty, our China sample room will study how to get the best substitution from Ethiopia and select the material and equipment necessary, send it over there. Is there, and how many machines? Because some of the machines can help to improve the quality and the quantity during the manufacturing process. So these 7 elements is almost the guideline for us to work with the customer. Next page, please. Some country like China, Vietnam, Cambodia has a very strong supporting industry to back up. Their supplier probably are the next door neighbor. So supply chain is very well connected. But in Ethiopia and other Africa country is very weak in this part. The supply of local material is very limited. Therefore, when we receive the order, we have to study where to find those material. As you see this slide, our operation in Ethiopia is highly vertical integrated. We run the tannery, outsole department, insole department, shoes factory, and even box assembly. The downside of to make so many things is very heavy investment. But we are lucky to have a good team and very knowledgeable people. Our general manager is Italian, and our department head is Chinese. The shop floor manager is the local. 95% of our team member have been working in Ethiopia for over 6 years. So they know very well the person, and also the labor know very well who is the supervisor. So this is it make our production very stable. Next page, please. This table to show is the changes of our import ratio in terms of volume on the 6 major components from 2012 to 2019. The top 4, like the last, upper, insole, and outsole, they are doing very well because from 2012, we almost import everything from China, but by 2019, it's only 3 to 10% average. We have to import. Most of them make it in Ethiopia by ourselves. But for some like our footbed, this part, because it's involved a lot of equipment, and machinery. So we still import a lot. For the short lining, this is a very labor-intensive work. So we let it make in Ethiopia. So we make about 50-50. Half of them is import from China or Italy. The other half, we can make it 100% in Ethiopia. For the accessory, because it's include like about some buckles and other zipper. And this item usually sourced globally. No matter we can buy from China, Taiwan, or Italy. But because this is changing very fast, and so we will choose it to eat rather than make everything by ourselves. The next page, please. This slide is showing I divided all the customer into three kinds: OEM, ODM, and OBM. OEM for a factory is 100% design follower. So we follow what the customer want and what they want to, what material they require. We have nothing to say. So we try to do everything as order. So in this part, the customer is fully control all 7 components. This kind of customer usually have a big order and they have a authorized vendor list. So, and very little margin. So you have to follow everything step by step. Otherwise, it's very easy to lose money. ODM, for effect, is a design, I can say is a contributor because we can give them some suggestion, what we can do and what we need to do, and what usually we can discuss and get best solution to make shoes easier and faster. The last one is OBM. OBM is for our experience is we start to I follow the USA to join the US exhibition in 2018. Uh, I'm quite happy with it because it's very helpful. You can find some little customer, even though it's little, but you can promote your own brand and your design, and you don't have much problem of select what material you can find locally. So this is one of the alternative for effect to do. So I think in the future, if we can make more exhibition, it would be very helpful for the African factory. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Frank, for a very good presentation. It has been a learning experience. I'd like now to invite our webinar attendees to pose questions or suggestions for our 3 speakers who have enlightened us with their presentation earlier. So you can raise your hand electronically, or we will manage. So any questions from the floor is welcome. I think while we are waiting for questions to come, I want to pose some question maybe to Nate and you, Dr. Frank. Apart from Cambodia, for example, who is a competitor to our region in terms of exports to the US, for example, apart from the ecosystem, the supply of cartons and other accessories being present What else should African manufacturers do to enter the US market? And what is the best way to promote, for example, those ecosystems to exist in Africa?
Dr. Frank, you want to go first?
I think at this moment, the most important thing for the Ethiopian factory is how to get the logistic problem to be removed. And this is the biggest problem that we are facing daily. And even though I try to make everything under one roof and make a lot of vertical integration, but I still have to import a lot of things. And like about for my bottom factory, for my outsole factory, now I'm focusing in TPR, but I didn't make the EVA and the and the PU bottom. So for when we a variety, give it to the customer, we still lack of a lot of choice to that. And but one thing is I noticed that probably e-commerce is quite amazing for the African factory if they want to make their own brand and using their local material to start a business. E-business, if we can set up a warehouse in the States and running the like about to sell in sample, something like that, probably is one of the alternatives we can have a chance to try. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would add that certainly the transportation and logistics issues are extremely important, especially with the rise in e-commerce. As Dr. Frank mentioned, there is a need to make sure that you can get the materials in and the final product out quickly and be very responsive to customers. And so that regional integration, the regional transportation and logistics infrastructure is critical. I would also say usually in terms of just showing your product, we would usually point to certain trade shows in the United States. All those trade shows are not meeting right now in the United States because of the pandemic. You're depending on online, and I know the TradeHub is trying to give factories and suppliers in the region that exposure in the United States. And so just trying to use the online mechanisms that are out there is right now the best way to raise the profile. But this regional approach is extremely important in terms of being able to source more materials regionally versus having to source those materials from Asia, and creating the transportation infrastructure to make sure that you can get the materials on time and deliver the product on time are critical.
Thank you very much, Nate. I think, there's two questions from the audience that are directly addressed to you. One is Shini from Nairobi is basically asking what is the ethical and sustainable sourcing trends. She wants to know your thoughts about that in supplying to the US. Same question is voiced by Azaria, who is also a brand out of Ethiopia. What are your thoughts on the environment for new sustainable and ethical brands?
So I'll take those a little bit separately, sustainability and ethical production. Sustainability is extremely important, and a lot of brands who are looking at East Africa are looking at the concept that they want to be able to go in and have sustainable manufacturing. Sustainability is a lot of things to a lot of people, but making sure that we're talking about environmental sustainability, we're talking about sustainability in terms of vertical integration and having the materials, a lot of things that Dr. Frank has done in his own factories and is trying to do in his own factory. Those are the keys that will really help. Sustainability has become extremely important to customers here in the United States. And so being able to tell a story that the supplier you're working with in Kenya or Uganda or Ethiopia is doing X, Y, and Z, and not only producing a high quality shoe, but producing a shoe in a very sustainable manner is a big selling point. On the ethical side, that's become extremely important. We, because of the growth of social media, it is very easy for our reputation to be damaged as a brand, and so any rumors, even whether they're true or not, that there's issues, labor rights issues, that there's mistreatment of workers in any way, can lead to major problems. And so it is good to make sure that your factories are socially compliant, that they meet certain codes of conduct, maybe look at third-party certification programs like RAP or BSCI or other things as a starting point to work on that. But it is a huge deal. Brands are trying to work with suppliers to improve the situation, but that's become a big focus as well here in the United States.
Thank you very much, Nate. Just a follow up on that. Okay, we've discussed about the sustainability and ethnical, and so that with different approaches to that. One question I have received is, what would be the highest AGOA duty differential that maybe East Africans can focus on, and what are the opportunities now that COVID is around for PP footwear PP production? This is a question from actually Margaret, and what's your comment? What is your view on this?
So the highest differential is actually the type of product that people are looking at right now during the pandemic, which Jordy was referring to, is its comfort shoes. So it's textile upper, rubber soled, sneakers, athleisure, Crocs type shoes. Many of them have duty rates of 20%, 37.5%, 48%, as high as 67.5%. So you're talking about that is where there's a huge advantage for East Africa in terms of a duty differential. Leather has a decent duty. You're talking about 8.5% for men's leather shoes and 10% for women's leather shoes, but you're talking about the real duty differential is on the shoes that are popular right now. Those more the comfort shoes, again, textile upper, rubber soled, or the rubber molded shoes like a Crocs. Those are very popular right now.
Jordy, you have been working with African factories for a long time now, 10 years, and the trend in Africa, exports from Africa has been very much on leather, dress, and some casual shoes, but not athleisure, as we have seen on the presentation you made. And that will mean a lot of, not a lot, but at least investments to change into, supplies, technology. So how do you see the factories and the environment you have worked in changing, adapting to this changing consumer demands?
Thank you, Teddy. I think that it's. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead. Yes.
Yeah. So I think that we're not that far away. I think that I'm just holding, and I don't think you could see it, but if I could get I just got a catalog from Johnson and Murphy yesterday in the mail, and I was looking at what types of shoes they're using and what type of shoes they're making. And a lot of these are unit bottoms, two-tone outsoles, leather and cushioning uppers, and same thing on the insoles. And they probably 30% of this catalog is superior fit, advanced cushioning, performance technology, and waterproofing. So those three ingredients, especially the advanced cushioning, a performance technology, and if we can develop, and I think we may have to, step up the product as far as quality goes, but if we could get into a system that may be universal within the countries for waterproofing, is a huge opportunity right now. It seems like as the trend is moving, when you go into, as Nate said, and other people you'll hear from today, the textile upper, fabric uppers, it's soft, easy on, easy off. That type of footwear is so important, and it can't, the growth's not going to be in what I call bulletproof shoes that are hard and boardy. They have to be soft, easy, and flexible. And we've talked about that a lot, but the market's there, and I think that's where we may have an opportunity.
Okay, thank you, Jordi. I think, in the interest of time, we will be answering some of the questions with a follow-up later on. I'll move on to the next presenter, Jinal, who is from Umoja, rather, Chief Business Officer out of Kenya. Jinal, please take the stage and present to us about your experience of Kenyan footwear manufacturer.
Hi, good day, everyone. Cannot say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening because we are over many time zones. My name is Jinal Shah, signing in from Mtwapa, Kenya, a small town near Mombasa. We are manufacturing a large number of footwear here. So just for example, we have basic flip-flops. We are manufacturing about 200,000 pairs a day. We have canvas shoes. Okay, here's a video coming up, which Leanne is playing for me. I'll give an introduction and I can get on. Thank you, Leanne, for that video. So, as I was saying, we are manufacturing close to 350,000 pairs of various footwear every day. Our factory is 40 years old. It was started in 1978 and predominantly manufacturing footwear for the regional market, not started to export footwear. So we are a very local local-based manufacturer. We produce and sell within the region. So we have a few product lines. We have flip-flops. We have canvas shoes. We have plastic injected footwear. We have our new line. We have safety shoes for work boots, and we have security shoes. So today I'm going to talk about our experience of exporting to the US. And this journey started about 2 years ago when Mr. Jordan walked in to Umoja and was talking to us about opportunities in the US, and we decided it was time to look into this. Before that, we had a few customers, but very small, and we decided to look at the connections that Mr. Jordan had brought. Out of a couple of introductions, there was a buying house in the US which decided to work with us and connect us to a sourcing agent in China, because the biggest challenge was sourcing materials and putting it together in form of shoes for export. As we have all heard, the challenges are to in the sourcing and logistics. Otherwise, we would have to manufacture everything in our factory. Let's start with just some of the advantages that we have. We have a large pool of workforce, relatively inexpensive labor costs, young and dynamic workforce, so we can find skilled and semi-skilled people locally in Kenya. Lower costs of labor. AGOA helps us because in reality, without the duty advantage, it would be very difficult for American buyers to look at East Africa as a viable sourcing opportunity. There is also in Kenya, there is also a good availability of leather. There are a few very good tanneries in the region. Textiles, cotton, canvas, basic textiles are readily available. Packaging materials. So when we make our shoes, we need to pack them somehow. So packaging materials are readily available, and in general, Kenya has a better developed industrial base compared to the neighboring countries. So it makes producing and exporting shoes relatively easy. I say relatively because it's not very easy for us, because we are used to the local market. We make our own brands, so we operate by different rules. But now when we are talking about exporting to the US, there are a lot of challenges. We can move on to the next slide, where I'll talk about what our experience and what the challenges are. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the biggest challenge that we've had is material availability, and we are operating mainly in the high volume space, where we are making large volume orders. And when the customer comes and says, I want a certain shoe with a certain design, with a certain textile, with a certain trim, eyelets, lace, not everything is available locally, so we have to make sure we get the right material out of China, and get it get it into Kenya on time, navigate all the hoops that we have to, customs clearance, shipping, logistics, everything on time, and then produce the shoe and ship it on time. So these are real big challenges. As you can see, my second point, our customers always compare us to China, and they tell us there is a container that leaves China and arrives in LA within a week or I think 10 days. We can never do that because I think the fastest we've ever got a container into the US is about 45 days. And there are no direct vessels calling from Kenya to the US port. Another problem that we have is skills availability in terms of technicians, footwear technicians, merchandisers. So a lot of these skills have to be imported. We have to get expatriates to work for us so that we can get things done right. Also, we have very high import duties on certain materials like textiles. Sometimes that can make things very difficult when it comes to meeting costs. There's a lot of red tape for importation in this part of the world. Also, customer expectations. When there is a big manufacturer who is willing to put down a few 100,000 pairs, they compare us to Chinese manufacturers. And as we have seen previously, and what Dr. Frank was saying, that in China, the supply chain is very well developed. So one factory does not have to do everything. And in this part of the world, none of that exists. The few customers that we have been working with are slowly starting to understand this, but it can be an uphill task to explain to a buyer the kind of challenges we face. So often this becomes a point when the buyer will say they give up and they will go back to China to buy their things because it's a lot easier. We are thankful we have some buyers who are still holding our hands and really help, supporting us because some of them have a vision about developing supply for footwear from Africa. Another problem which we had was trade finance and trade insurance. The buyer was asking us for a certain amount of open credit. It was difficult for us to find an insurance based in Kenya. It was not that easy for somebody to give us the insurance. Another thing is quality control. When we are producing and selling within the local market in East Africa, the quality control standards are not as high as what the American buyer needs. So we needed to really develop a lot on that. Make sure that whatever we are shipping out is good. Also, the other challenge that we found was most of the new exports we did to the US was during COVID times. So we had a lot of difficulty getting auditors in because the buyers wanted to see that we are compliant and we are looking after our workers and the social compliance aspect of it. The other thing is in this part of the world, there is a small pool of manufacturers in the same field. So footwear sector is very small. And many of the other manufacturers are more niche manufacturers, not, I mean, own brand manufacturers. So it gets difficult to compare notes with others, or to have the same stand when we can lobby with government if we need certain advantages, or we need some things done for ourselves. Another thing which we learned a lot during this journey is the standards required for the US, like California 65, REACH. Some buyers have their own standards, and to follow this, because we have to make sure our supply chain, whoever is selling us the ink or whoever is selling us any of the material, can also be on board and make sure that we get the right kind of materials. And then testing, some of the labs in this part of the world do not do all the tests, so we have to again rely on China. We make a sample, and a pre-shipment sample has to be sent to China for testing, and all this takes a lot of time. So in my experience, for a turnaround from design to shipment, which in China might be 90 days, with Africa you have to think about 180 days or even more, because if we have to make a mold, get the mold approved, we don't make molds here, so molds have to be shipped in from China, and that takes a good 45 to 60 days, and then we produce maybe 30 days, and then shipping times, another 30 days. So it takes a longer time, and very important for customer to understand the logistics involved in manufacturing. Next slide. Here is a showcase of some of the products that we have produced. These are all customer designs, specifications from customer. So on top are the rain boots. These were highly specified, so they are for winter. Now they have landed in the US as of last month and will be going for distribution. They are rated at -15 degrees. A lot of the materials we have to source from China. And we produce these. The bottom are like what we've been all talking about, athleisure, comfortable shoes, all manufactured in Kenya, but quite a bit of the material was sourced from China. I think that brings me to the end of my presentation, and I will take questions later on.
Thank you very much, Jinal, for the presentation on a modular rubber and entry into the US market and manufacturing challenges and opportunities. Our next speaker is Azaria Mengistu, who is owner of the NZ brand. Azaria, please take the floor. Thank you very much.
We always wanted to start a brand that challenged the narrative, challenged stereotypes and perceptions that are commonly associated with the people, but these are truly handmade shoes.
By selling materials, it goes down to the finest little detail.
Every piece is cut by hand, it's hand stitched, it's hand lasted. We wanted to showcase this potential that Africa could do just as good as anywhere else in the world.
So when you buy a pair of NZs, you're not just buying a pair of shoes, you become part of the NZ mission. Change perceptions of Africa. Business.
Hello, everybody. It's an honor to be here with you. I'm not sure I don't think my internet connection is as strong as some, so I hope you could get the bulk of that video. But as Teddy said, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Enzi. We're a premium footwear brand based out of Ethiopia, and it's been a long journey. But what Janelle said about the footwear sector in the region being kind of small is true, because I've interacted with a couple of the companies, and including Janelle, at one point or another on our journey. I just wanted to share our story with you. I think it's from a very different perspective, just as far as scale and quality and what we're doing at Enzi. And so with that, if we can just go to the presentation, and I'll just walk you guys through our story. So if we go to, actually, we can just go to the second slide, and why we decided to start Enzi. And the problem that we had, which is a pretty big problem, a common problem across the continent, is that when it comes to raw materials, we're the richest continent in the world. When it comes to money, Africa's the poorest. And this was always something that bothered us greatly. And we wanted to create something that chipped away at this inequality, and chipped away at this, this economic imbalance, if you will, in the world. So our solution for this was to start a brand. We knew the way to retain the most for a commodity was be as far down the value chain as you possibly could. So we wanted to start a brand that, like we said in that video, that kind of went against some of the norms and even some of the realistic challenges, but just showed the real potential that we have in our part of the world. So we knew to do that, especially once we got started, that we were going to have to invest a good amount of time in building some kind of infrastructure or some kind of manufacturing capacity. We've been on the ground for over 10 years in Ethiopia. We spent about the first 5.5 years trying to work with existing factories in Ethiopia to produce shoes at the quality we wanted, and it never worked out. Dr. Frank, we actually spoke to Renzo. He was very nice and helpful and gave us a lot of good advice, but wasn't willing to make the shoes for us. And so the factories that we did try, the last factory we worked with was literally, no exaggeration, we had 100% rejection rate. There wasn't a single shoe we could accept to export under the standards that we wanted. And then on top of that, we also realized to execute this, we're going to have to operate more of the value chain, if you will, because it's just not, it's not a common business channel, going from Ethiopia, going from Africa, East Africa in particular, to the West or to other parts of the world. So we're going to have to manage more of the value chain, manage more of manufacturing to execute our brand. So with that, we can go to the next slide. So why was a brand so important to us? It's really three main things. It's the power of perception I've listed here, the power of storytelling, and the power of self-belief. All three of these things were huge with our original objective of wanting to challenge the way the world viewed African capacity or African skill. If I could tell a short story about the power of perception, this really explains it well. I was out a few years ago. I was out to dinner with some friends, and one of my friends joined us late, and he had a guest with him. It was her first time in Ethiopia, and she had only been there a week or so. And I asked her, I said, "Oh, how do you like Ethiopia so far? You've just been here." She was coming to volunteer for an NGO, and her response, I'll never forget it. She said, "Oh, well, this is really nice. Ethiopia is really nice." But she said, I know I'll see the real Ethiopia once I start getting into my volunteer work, start seeing, different parts of the country." And that stuck with me because her perceptions were so powerfully installed in her mind that they were more influential than the reality of actually being in the country and seeing it's not as bad as the news says, or not as bad as her expectation. Even when she was engaging with a realistic Ethiopia that was a lot nicer than she had anticipated, she couldn't really accept it as the real Ethiopia until she went and saw extreme poverty, or she went and saw something that, resonated with her in that way. And so that shows how powerful perception is and how powerful it is to create a narrative or to create stories like we try and do with our brand that go against that current. And that's a big driving force behind what we're doing. Same with the idea of self-belief, because to start to change these narratives of perceptions, a lot of times we need to start with ourselves. I remember some of the first factories in the beginning that we tried to partner with, we had these embosses that would stamp on the leather that said NZ or NZ Footwear, made in Ethiopia. And we would have so many people comment to us, from supervisors down to regular factory workers, asking us, are you sure you want to put made in Ethiopia on this product? Are you sure that's what you want to say? What are they going to think when it goes out? And so even us, some of us, in some ways, we've kind of bought into this idea, and some of the stereotypes that people have, put on us. So it starts with self-belief, I think, as well, to kind of help shift this narrative and just show that there is potential to do some really amazing things. So how did we go about building this brand, and what was our theory? It's been a long, painful lesson, long journey with a lot of lessons, I should say. But before we ever got on the ground in Ethiopia, we spent years brainstorming, arguing, trying to crystallize this idea, right? And once we had these values in place, that this is what this brand was going to be about, we let those convictions, or the purpose or the why we're doing it, drive all of our decisions. So the reason we decided to go with a premium brand wasn't necessarily a business decision, or wasn't because we thought it'd be cool or the sexiest thing to do. It was genuinely because a premium brand would challenge, would tell the most powerful story that would challenge these kind of perceptions of African of skill and craftsmanship. And we wanted to make a fully handmade shoe because that talks about the craft of making a shoe and everything. And the price point, because we wanted to say, just because it comes from this part of the world doesn't mean it's cheap, So all the decisions on how we built our brand were driven by that core purpose. And once we had those core purposes, we just were uncompromising and not willing to waver. So that's why we could go to a factory and have we wouldn't take anything that didn't meet our standards, and it took a long time, but eventually we decided to try building our own small production. We rented out a garage space and started making handmade shoes ourselves, hired a couple of people, and started growing things from there. But all the success we've garnered as a brand to date, which it's still quite modest, especially by the standards of some of the peers on this on the panel here. But this all happened from when we started making the shoes ourselves, when we took that step of belief, even in ourselves and our abilities to do this. So we've been featured by CNN, and we've been called one of the top independent footwear brands by magazines like GQ, and I've had a handful of celebrity endorsements and things like that. So it's been exciting, but it's all started from a really humble operation inside a garage in Addis Ababa, making handmade shoes, but just doing it to the best of our ability. So that we can go to the next slide and just quickly talk about our U.S. experience. It's actually been our strongest market. I think what's been great about the U.S. is just they seem to be much more open-minded to new brands than a lot of other markets. We found that tend to be a little bit more brand conscious, if you will. We've done some really cool collaborations. I'm pictured here with Corey, who's the owner and founder of a streetwear brand out of Chicago called Leaders. This is really a really well-known streetwear brand all over the world. And we developed this custom all-black shoe that we launched, and they had done some apparel, and we had built a whole story around it. The person in the bottom right corner is a Hollywood actor called Sam Adegoke from a TV show on Netflix called Dynasty, but that's him wearing the collaboration. And so we found that there's just been a really nice appetite. It's been much easier to penetrate and get traction, even if it's in a smaller way. AGOA has been amazing for us. Can't recommend it strongly enough. We've imported into Europe and we've imported into the US. The nightmare of, I can't explain to you how difficult it was just to try and get the information of what we needed to do to import into Germany. And even then, when we got all the information and made every single phone call we could, our product still sat in German customs for about a week, a little over a week. As opposed to the US, where all the information is clearly available online, there's people ready to answer your questions via telephone. And I think our shipment spent about 30 minutes, 35 minutes in customs in the US. So it was really seamless and worked out great for us. And I think what's really exciting now, and what we've seen a lot of traction in the last 3 or 4 months, is there's a big consciousness to kind of support Black-owned brands that's come up in the U.S. And we've been given a lot of opportunities, even some grant funding for being a Black-owned brand in the U.S. The exciting opportunity now is that we're actually being mentored by the Senior Vice President, Ralph Lauren, and he's been helping us build our B2C strategy and connecting us with some major retailers in the U.S. as well, which is exciting. So 2021 is by far looking like the best year for us. So that's kind of been our experience to date. We mostly do direct to consumer and use DHL to ship directly from Ethiopia to our customers in the States. So with that, go to the last slide. And we may seem a little bit insignificant because we're just so small compared to a lot of other people who are taking part in the webinar today, and the people who have spoken. But I think SMEs play a really big role. I think we're very important and represent some really low-hanging fruit for growth and scale. So we find, especially a lot of these large government agencies tend to take, and rightly so, have a real macro level view of bottlenecks, of issues, and what are the systemic issues for a sector in a country. A lot of us in the SME space are flexible enough and small enough to navigate those and still develop superior products, or we've developed solutions for those, or workarounds for those. And I think sometimes these SMEs like us, can help be kind of like build a bit of a bridge, or help create new, be the first people to kind of penetrate certain markets, especially higher end markets, and change the way those higher end buyers that really shift the course of a sector can help change their perceptions about what is possible, or what kind of products can come from this part of the world. So I think SMEs at large have a role to play, and I think we represent some of the best cases for growth. So with that, I'll just say thank you, and like Janelle, I'll wait for any questions anyone may have at the end.
Thank you very much, Azaria, for your presentation. Interesting journey. Next up is CEO of Equator from Kenya. Varshini would be presenting about the perspective on the East African brand entering the US market. Varshini, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Teddy. It's an honor, first of all, to be here among all the industry veterans. So quickly about Equator, we are a handcrafted footwear and leather products bag based in Kenya. We focus mainly on, a lot of things that Enzi spoke about earlier, which is hand lasting, hand stitching, hand cutting. And we also pride ourselves on the fact that a lot of our raw materials is sourced locally. The leather is all from Alframa. We work very closely with Umoja to source our rubber as well. Both of these sources, both of these companies have been great for our kind of raw material sourcing. But of course, as Mr. Frank and Mr. Gino had pointed out earlier, sourcing still is a nightmare when it comes to things such as zippers, machines, spare parts, technical know-how, skilled operators who can operate certain kind of automated machines, etc. So those are still challenges I think we're working out, and Kenya has a long way to go. However, in terms of leather and some kind of like rubber outsoles, we've kind of established that. And kind of moving on to retailing, we currently sell via Instagram and our website, and also through our own stores in Nairobi. We have one in Westgate and one in Village Market. And we also sell to a lot of international boutiques in Europe and in the United States. Moving forward, believe it or not, this is exactly how we started. It was literally a table and a couple of folks around the table making sandals. And it was as basic as it could get. And this was not long ago. This was literally in 2017. And we've come a long way from that, thanks to you know, a lot of people I also met at USAID. A big shout out to Jordi. So Mr. Jordan Solomon has been a biggest kind of mentor and supporter from you know, during our growth. You know, the trade shows sorry, that USAID has sent a lot of East African brands has been vital in helping us connect with the American market. You know, a lot of things that they did at these trade shows also made a difference. So anybody can pay for, you know, stall at the trade show and shop, but what you do before, at the trade show, and after is what really matters. So some things that were done right were things such as, you know, the USAID would send out email blasts with key information about all participating companies. We had the industry expert, who was Jordan Solomon, on board, mentoring all the brands before they went to the trade show. And we you know, had to prepare ourselves in terms of, you know, photos of the factory, catalog, lookbook, print marketing material, business cards. These seem like very small details, but a lot of people who attend the trade show for the first time sometimes forget these key material. And another important thing was also that you know, having this industry expert helped in a lot of ways, such as you know, he knew these organizers from his, you know, X number of years in the industry, and we would get key spots at the trade shows where there was more foot traffic. He would know, you know, the CEOs of all big brands and retailers, and all of these people would stop by our, you know, stand and to say hello. But then the conversation would be, you know, the takeaway from the conversation would be, what are the trends? What are brands looking for? What design should you be focusing on? So going to the trade show was very useful, just in terms of like listening to what the industry is expecting you to do. And yes, meeting buyers was the goal. However, there were so many other things that we got out of the trade show. And the key thing was also the post-trade show follow-up. Talking to you know, all the buyers you met, and also to the buyers who did not show up for your appointment, and kind of like talking about, you know, what your collection has to offer and what they're willing to buy. And it also has been a great platform to connect with other factories and brands to, you know, talk about challenges we're facing and talk about how we can do things better together. Moving on. So how it's going, this is actually the picture of our second facility, but we're now in an even larger facility. And we still have our handmade line where we focus on, you know, a lot of kind of like handcrafted processes. However, we have a brand new automated line because we've realized that over time, we have some clients who, you know, order a small, you know, batch first, and then they roll it out, and then they're like, oh my God, this was an instant success, and we want 500 pairs, 600 pairs. So then we realized that it kind of doesn't work with our timelines to hand make everything. So we do have an automated line for brands that are looking to, you know, try out small batch and then roll it out on a larger scale. So we can do both. And we've also increased the number of boutiques we shipped internationally thanks to USAID. Moving on. And another key takeaway from attending trade shows and interacting with other brands has been that 2020 has been a challenging year for all of us. And there's no longer face-to-face trade shows. People cannot touch and feel the product. And buyers are looking at brands only on a digital platform. So we've realized it's also key to not just make high quality products, but also photograph and present them well. Our focus from the very beginning has been setting up the factory, training the local artisans and improving their skill levels. However, 2020 has taught us as a brand that if we want to connect with our American buyers, we need to present ourselves better on a social platform, be it Instagram, website, Facebook, etc. So a lot of our focus this year has shifted from just focusing on the quality of the product and improving that to actually focusing on presenting the product to the end buyer. Moving on. So these are some of our products. We do everything from handbags to shoes. As you can see, the shoe on the right is 100% made in Kenya. Most of the material is also from Kenya. As I mentioned, all the leather is from Alframa. The rubber is from Umoja. So we try and keep our sourcing local, and we ensure that our manufacturing is also 100% local. And I end my presentation with this. You can reach me on this email address, and that's our website. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Shini, for a very informative presentation. This guy, Brian, could you please unmute yourself and ask your question? Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Brian is my name, and I'm the CEO of Bravo Shoes. I'm just very humbled of the presentations of all the brands, especially in Africa. And they have pointed out all the challenges that we've had in Africa, most especially financing, then the tanneries, because the Umoja presenter was talking about that we don't have very good tanneries. And for as long as we still have to outsource materials from out of East Africa, it will still be very difficult for some of us. Myself, I tried to start up production in the country, Uganda, and because I found out that even getting the best leather, okay, the leathers we have, but getting the well-finished leathers in this country became a very, very big problem for me, and I got very frustrated until when I said, yes, my brand, I can be able to outsource people who can be able to make the qualities we want as a brand and be able to sustain our brand, because we realize that production, due to the qualities involved, especially in the line of tanneries, was really still wanting. So my question is, as the project with USAID, footwear is very expensive, a venture, very, very expensive. Like me, I'm concentrated onto school shoes, and school shoes, you need a lot of money to invest in. So you find that stops us as brands to grow bigger because we need lots of money. So as you said, is there a way that you can be able to connect, with the offshore investors together with the East African brand owners who have taken it for some time, so that they can be able to join up hands and invest and be able to make sure that we get the qualities that are acceptable by the United States. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian. So your question about the acceptable quality to the US, this is probably a challenge that has been faced by Azaria of NZ brand, as they were rejected with their factory a couple of times while developing this technology. Azaria, do you have a light to shed on this? Maybe Margaret can put some light on this as well, in terms of the support USAID can give.
I don't know. I don't know how much I can speak on it, because we haven't officially received too much support from USAID in the form of cash. To be honest, it's the nature of the beast with footwear. Unfortunately, it is a very cost-heavy venture upfront. And there's having your financial forecasting and financial planning put together is really crucial. And I can totally relate to you, Brian, just because we struggled for funding for a long time as well. It's very difficult. I think it might be best for someone from USAID to respond to maybe what kind of programs or options there might be for something like that.
Thank you, Teddy. If I may just jump in there, I think the question raised by Brian is very relevant. There are two possible solutions. We have a regional bank called Trade and Development Bank. It used to be known as a PTA bank. They've established an SME fund, and they have offices, I think, in all the countries that we come from. And you should be able to get facilities from them if you're an SME. You've noted my contacts. Please send me an email. I will introduce you to one of the contact officers who presented in one of the previous sessions. So that's one option. The second option is we have a USAID project, which is called Kenya Investment Mechanism. It's called Kenya Investment Mechanism, but it's actually now being, it was initially piloted in Kenya, it's been spread to all the East African countries, including all the countries represented here. And they will be looking at supporting people looking for investment, either like looking for new shareholders or possibly raising finance. And what they do is they incentivize the intermediaries, the consultants who try to put the deals together. So that's one of the ways you can get support. Finally, there are a couple of good investment advisory companies. I'll just give you an example, Open Capital, and they are running various support programs on behalf of development partners. And they can also point you in the direction of where you can identify either loan capital or different types of investment capital. So please get in touch with me, send me an email, and I can share with you. And this goes to everybody else. We may not be able to answer all the questions. So if your question has been directed to a particular speaker and you've put it on the chat, we have your emails, we'll send your response by email. So we may not be able to have enough time to respond to every single question, but we will certainly respond by email. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Margaret and Azaria, for your replies. At this point, I would like to ask all participants, if you see on the right side of your screen, we have posted a link. That is a feedback form. We would kindly ask you to click on that and fill the form. In the meantime, please also send us any question. You can type it down there and we'll get back to you. So I'm asking all participants to do that now and take maybe some few minutes to do that. Leanne, is there anything that you'd like to address while this feedback form is being filled?
Not really, Teddy. I'm just I have put the feedback form, the responses all on. So I don't know if you can see it, so that we can see how people are feeling. I haven't received any responses as yet, so that is how the response form will look like. I don't know. You can see it on your end?
Yes.
Yes, there is one response. It has taken them 56 seconds to fill. So it's taking a short time. We have 3 responses so far.
Okay.
You can see it, Teddy?
Yes, I can. It is shared. I can see the responses and the
Okay.
average time it takes.
All right. So we have 4 responses so far.
Maybe if I can say something as people are filling in the questionnaires or the survey feedback, I'd really like to thank all the speakers and all the participants for staying on the call this time. I know it was easy to drop off because it's after your office hours, but we do really appreciate your participation and your questions. I'd also like to say that we only featured a small selection of the factories we have in East Africa. If you saw my presentation, I'd featured factories from or producers from Rwanda, such as Uzuri K&Y, who have some fantastic leather sandals. They've been selling to the US for a number of years. In Uganda, we have Seco Designs, just to mention, who also produce handbags and beautiful leather sandals. And there are many, many others we've worked with over the last 3 or 4 years. So these are just a sample, and we hope that many of you will consider working with us. We need to fill that gap. We need to get back to 40 million exports from our region. And Tanzania, Rwanda, Kenya, Ethiopia, and who have I left out? Yeah, all the countries. Yeah, all the countries can export to the US under AGOA. We have all the benefits. And as Nate Herman mentioned, the products which are in demand in the US are the ones where we have the biggest duty preference. So before everybody else gets organized and recovers from COVID, let's get our act together and be ready with fastest with the mostest to the US so that we can fill the gap that is there, meeting the consumer demands at the best possible price and with the best possible quality. So I want to challenge all of you. Let's get out there and get our products on the US, in the US customers' feet. Thank you very much, and I'll hand over back to Teddy.
Thank you very much, Margaret. I think, as we feel in and people are, have stayed back, I'll take your your speech as a closing remark because, I don't think, there's nothing much to add. You have covered quite the points there. What I want to say in closing is the organizers who includes you, Lynn, Naima, and the team at USAID, and the panelists who have taken their time at different time zone, has worked with us to present their points to our audiences relentlessly. I would like to thank every one of you for making this happen. I also want to thank all the audience who have been with us the last more than 2 hours for their patience, but also their participation and enthusiasm into this project. With that, I think we will close it off. If there is nothing more that one of our panelists, speakers, or audience would like to add.
Maybe, Teddy, to just check if there is anyone who has not responded to the poll, to the questions. I may not call it a poll. In case there's anyone who's not provided their feedback, we have around 9. So if someone still hasn't responded, they can still be able to fill it in even as you get the final closing remarks.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so perhaps just for us. All right. Okay. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to say something quickly. I think earlier Mr. Brian had mentioned that, he had a lot of trouble sourcing leather in East Africa. But I just wanted to point out that one of our biggest strengths in East Africa is our leather. And that's what I think Mr. Jinal also mentioned in his presentation, that one of the strengths that we have is the leather availability in East Africa. And I'm sure the other brands such as Seiko and the others would agree, because all of us have built our brands on the availability of the raw material. And I think it's important to see what's available in our countries and use that raw material to build upon that.
Thank you, Shini. I think this is just the beginning of our collaboration. Definitely, you can send Mr. Conrad from one of our audience has asked that this presentation be sent through email. This will be shared. This is recorded, and we will be engaging with you on some other platforms. And I'll just leave the final remark for Mr. Jordan Saliman, and thank you all for your participation, and we'll wind down after Jordan's remark. Thank you very much.
Teddy, can you hear me?
Yes, Jordi, you have the last say. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you to everybody. I think that the seminar I felt was very useful. I think there's a great collaboration here. I would encourage the visitors and participants to get to know one another. You know, I think that there's a big, I think the goal has to be April Go. April Go. April's the month we've got to all come out. We got to be ready to go because it's going to be, I believe, a big opportunity for everybody, please God. I believe that God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. 2 ears because we can listen twice as hard. I think that this seminar is a great place to listen, to learn, and get to know and have collaborations with one another. I think that, Sheeny, you understand the leather business. I think that Janal, he understands the leather business, maybe some of the challenges that some of these other factories have in getting materials. You can give them, you know, a hand, some coaching. I think that's the biggest thing that comes out of this is learn, listen, and work together. I wish you all good health, stay well, and be safe. And God bless you.
Thank you very much, Jordi. I think, you know, we will wind down our meetings webinar today with your great words. Thank you, everybody. Keep connected, keep us in the loop, and we'll look forward to something great as we go forward on this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Teddy.